You're listening to The Unstoppables, where each week we show you how to overcome obstacles and transform the sting of failure into the reward of growth. And now, here's your host, best-selling author, keynote speaker, and CEO, Bill Wooditch.
Stay calm and carry on. Words for today, words for any day. Think about it. Each of us are faced with our own form of adversity, internal, external. Challenge for each of us is, what do we do when we're faced with it? Do we cower in the shadows? Do we run? Do we deny it? Or do we move forward, gaining momentum to become unstoppable? Because it's what you do with those challenges in those times when you think you can't that makes the difference in your life. My special guest today is Scott Cullather. He's the CEO and co-founder of INVNT and the co-author of ForbesBooks Challenge Everything, a new anecdotal and advice-led book for entrepreneurs, business leaders, and CMOs. Under Scott's leadership at INVNT, the multi-award-winning agency has redefined the way organizations communicate to their employees, customers, journalists, and business partners, effectively changing the way they think, feel, behave, and perform. As a successful entrepreneur and business leader, he knows how a challenger approach to every aspect of one's own business and the marketplace, from your organizational structure to approach to leadership and philanthropy, that can provide the changes necessary to achieve steady growth and, most important, sustainable entrepreneurial success. Scott, welcome to The Unstoppables.
Bill, thank you very much. I'm so excited to be on your show, and I can't wait for my mother to hear that introduction.
Scott, you mentioned two things in there. They are not only alliteration, but there are things that sometimes make people go, wait a minute, I don't want to do that. One is change, and the other is challenge. So how can leaders incorporate that challenger concept into their own business?
Yeah, well, it's a really great question, Bill. And I think both of those words make people uncomfortable, just the very nature of the word, change and challenge. But from my perspective, or our perspective, we think those are yin and yang to one another. So in order to change, you've got to constantly challenge. And if you don't challenge, you're not going to change. And by the way, once you do change, you've got to continue to challenge in order to change more. And so we have a philosophy at INVNT around this principle of being comfortable, getting comfortable being uncomfortable. Because the more you change, the more uncomfortable you're going to get. And the more you challenge, the more you're going to change. So at INVNT, we started in 2008 in the height of the economic meltdown. And since that time, we've grown to become a global agency. And so from 2008 until today, 12 years later, we have undergone a tremendous amount of change as an organization and an agency.
You know, I love, I think I might take this, but I'll give you credit. I love the yin and yang of change and challenge. That is where growth occurs.
100%.
You know, Scott always said that the death knell for the achiever, the one that's aspirational, that wants to keep achieving, the death knell is comfort around thinking they know what they know, and they don't want to change what they think they know, and they don't want to challenge themselves because it's just comfortable enough. So how do you attack a mindset that is not closed, but it's not as maybe permeous as some other ones, that says, you know, I'm good enough where I am?
Yeah, well, it happens every day to organizations all around the world, and we happen to be fortunate enough to work with many of the largest companies and brands in the world. But you example after example after example. One that I like to talk about is Howard Johnson's. You know, at a time they were the largest hotel chain and largest restaurant chain in the world, and all of a sudden overnight they disappeared. So what happened to those guys? They became comfortable. They stopped doing the things that they had done to get them to where they were, and all of a sudden they filed for Chapter 11 and went bankrupt. And so we really have this belief that scale breeds mediocrity or breeds comfort, right? And so the larger you get as an organization, you can use your scale, and you don't have to be innovative, and you don't have to be nimble, and you don't have to do the things you used to do that got you to where you were. And so therefore you become mediocre, and mediocre is the best friend of failure. So the larger you get, the more you've got to continue to challenge as a leader, you've got to continue to challenge your organization to do the kinds of things that they did and you did when you started the business and you were growing the business where it is today.
Mediocre is the best friend of failure. There's a takeaway right there. Mediocre is the best friend, because I firmly believe that if you're not,
think about it. They walk down the street hand in hand with each other every day.
They do, and they probably actually do more than that. I'm thinking about this in a salacious way, but I'll let it go. We're going to stay more PG, not as R. You know, you mentioned Howard Johnson's, and it brings me back to a place in West Lafayette, Indiana. When I went to Purdue, and there was an overfill of students, and there's such an overflow that we had to go to Howard Johnson's, some of us, for about one semester. It was awesome. They made my bed every day. It was great. It was great.
Right.
So I'll digress down that road as far as you want to go.
But like, think about it. What happened to those guys? And now Wyndham is actually bringing that brand back, and they're doing a really remarkable job. And if you look at the financials and what they're doing, they've taken back the discipline and the principles that built that brand into the global leader, and they're starting to grow that brand back again. And I think it's going to be an exciting business to watch over the next couple of years.
Scott, in business, and I've seen many people who fashion themselves as leaders, who maybe by designation are in charge of something, by designation. And those people largely insulate themselves from the external. As you said, when you grow in scale, sometimes that breeds a certain level of complacency, mediocrity ensues. But maybe they insulate themselves, and maybe they surround themselves with people who say yes. And they don't want to challenge what they've done because they believe that has been a success. And they don't want to break eggs and make an omelet. So how do leaders challenge themselves, and by doing so, inspire their employees to challenge the status quo of mediocrity every day?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I mean, I think from my perspective, the first thing is you've got to be a servant leader. So you have to be humble enough to know that you're the guy or the gal that's calling the shots, but you have to be subservient, and you have to work for your teams of people. So it doesn't, to me, matter what level what level you are in your organization. If you have people reporting to you, you actually need to take a mindset of your reporting to them.
Man, you know, I liked you before we get on the air. Now I really like you a lot. When I learned this in Australia on my very first quote vacation unquote when I started my company, and it had taken me so long to take a vacation. And I thought, wow, you know, I'm an owner. I own this company. You know, I have employees, and I learned in Australia when I was still being called upon to close deals, when I wanted to be on vacation, right? That the company owns me. I'm the employee. I am the employee. And that's just my mindset going forward, was always that way. And I took on the characteristics of servant leadership before it was vogue to say it was servant leadership. I put my ego at the door and made it about others, because in servant leadership, your ego has to be secondary or tertiary to the group.
That's exactly right. And so many leaders aren't able to make that mind shift, you know, and it's a really important one. And to your point, like I thought, well, when I became the CEO of my company, I'm gonna be able to set my own schedule. I'm gonna be able to set my own plans. Hell no, hell to the no. That does not happen. In fact, it's quite the reverse, because you know, successful leaders, you've got to be and now we have a global agency. We have 8 offices, 5 different countries. We're on 4 continents. You've got to be available to your team 24/7. And so that notion of I'm the boss, I can get up at noon and roll in at 2 and leave at 4, that just doesn't work, in my opinion, for successful leaders.
You know, Scott, one of the things I like to tell our aspiring leaders and people that enter into the realm of production is that it's a Faustian bargain. And in the Faustian tale, you give up something to get something, and you got to make sure that trade-off is worthy of the trade. And I learned this: you never get up without it, you never go to bed without it. So it's always there.
Well, yeah, no, I love your positioning of you need to receive value you need to give value in order to receive value. And I think that's 100% spot on, Bill. And that's a mindset that we have as an organization. In fact, sometimes it's to a fault because we're always over delivering or over giving to our customers or our clients. And sometimes it stings us a little bit, but in the final analysis, it's allowed us to grow our business from, 2008 in the height of the economic meltdown, from one office with 5 employees to 8 offices with over 100 employees, in 5 different countries. And so we firmly believe in your principle. And I didn't know the words that you had described, but I ascribe to your principle of you've got to give value in order to receive value.
Inherent in that quote is the corollary that's something you dive into in your book, and that is this, my friend. To do that, you have to become of value. You have to build your own skill set. You have to become aware. You have to be able to take those challenges, have the mindset to be open to the possibility of something different, and embrace change and challenge. So in your book, you discuss how entrepreneurs can do far more better than the established companies while having far fewer employees, and that excites all of us who have payroll burdens today. How can this model work including a global scale you talk about?
Yeah, well, I think it's striking the right balance between process, which, by the way, as you scale, you have to have process in place, right? You can't continue. In the old days when we started, we were all heroes. We worked 24/7. We pulled rabbits out of a hat at 3 a.m. We threw it across the fence to the client, and oh my gosh, they bought it. But as you continue to scale, that notion of being a hero can't happen, or it's going to cause failure, And so you got to begin to put process in place. But process can also be the enemy of success. And there are so many organizations that put process in place not to fuel growth and to fuel success, but basically to create structure. And so process can become a roadblock. And so we have, at our agency, we like to call the operational team members process prophets. They have to know, well, how much of the ingredient of process do I need to put in place, and how much do I need to make sure that their team members aren't coloring outside the lines, and then yet let them do their own thing and add their own level of creativity to the process in order to continue to grow and excel, and use that process as an accelerator rather than a roadblock.
Process can be the enemy of success. Stuck in process and being and shrinking to the strictures of a certain system can take away all of that all-important autonomy that's needed at the point of contact or other points of contact to move your entire proposition forward.
That's exactly right. And we have another principle at INVNT. It's do more with less, faster, and so like this idea of hour-long conference calls with 10 team members, gone. We're 15, 20-minute conference calls, 3 team members tops, and then the team members will disseminate the information to their extended team members. So it's do more with less, faster.
I'm going to take that clip and I'm going to make it mandatory for every manager in our company to listen to, and then maybe put on their door in typewritten form, because that is excellent. The king of 10-minute meetings back in the day when I was that hero walking out in the OK Corral and maybe sometimes walking back with not too much blood flow for me. There was Hank Greenberg, who was the head of AIG, and he said, if you can't do it in 10 minutes, you can't do it. Where are you to plan? What do we have to do to get you on track? And if you are on plan, what do we do to get you more? And that's it. Those meetings are, you just hit me in the with a visceral gut punch on that. What a time and money suck for people to hide behind a concept or idea that no one wants to raise their hand that has the good idea to even try to complete.
Totally. And Hank I was fortunate enough to work with him several times over the course of my career. He had that right, Bill, absolutely. And if you look at most successful people, they may come across as rude or short. They're not. They're efficient.
Yes. Yes. Efficiency. We spend too many time. I can go on and on.
Well, a prime example is you'll ask somebody a question. You'll ask them, "What's the weather?" or what's the temperature today? And instead of saying it's 88 degrees, you get like a 3-minute preamble before they get to the 88 degrees. Just give me the center cut, man. You know, I don't need all the fat around the bone. I just want the center cut, you know? And I think that has to do with efficiency, right?
You know what? I love that. I always tell people, and people know this when they come into my office, it's the cape and the sword. I don't need to see the cape flowing around. Just show me where the sword is, because that's what's going to kill me anyway. Just give me the bottom line.
Exactly.
Time.
Yep.
You in your book, you emphasize the explosion of smartphones and tablets and the need for companies to connect with the massive millennial and Gen Z populations. Why is that so important, Scott?
Well, so we're in the business of live events, which actually is obviously put on ice right now. And but the interesting thing about millennials and gens, they want one thing, and by the way, they make up over half the world's population right now. And they want one thing more than anything else, and that is a shareable experience. And so creating an experience is an easy thing, right? But then how do you make it shareable? So this notion of smart technology, apps, digital, combined with this idea of live is really the holy grail for us. And then so it gives the consumers, by the way, you know, many brands and organizations will argue that they're the most valuable consumer on the planet right now, millennials and gens, because we're forming their buying habits and we're forming their brand allegiances and alliances, and they will continue to grow and become the most powerful buying audience on the planet. So that's cool, because you can create a brand relationship through the live experience. But what you do is you build a community through the digital experience, and it gives brands and organizations using the digital technology overlaid on the live experience the ability to track and measure. And so there's data collection that's created as a result of combining both the live experience along with the digital technology.
And if companies don't embrace live brand storytelling, are they going the way of the dinosaur, or are they already there?
Well, I think they will go the way of the dinosaur. I mean, right now, the whole live events world is on ice. You know, we're in hibernation at the moment. So I think as we come out of this, live events are going to be more in demand than ever before, because people have an innate need to connect and want to connect personally. At INVNT, what we've done is we've used this idea that we've been designing and producing for a number of years now to basically create a real phygital experience, a collision of, or an intersection of, a physical activity with the digital activity. And so we're replacing these business events and consumer-facing brand experiences where you used to be able to go to a single location and get together. We're replacing that, and we're combining the best of what you used to be able to do with those experiences, combined with what you can do in your own home, and then marrying that with the digital technology. And we're having a great deal of success. And it's been I think a lifesaver for many brands and organizations, given, you know, where we are with the pandemic right now.
We've mentioned your book. By now, there's a number of people in the audience who are interested in finding the book, purchasing the book. Where do we find you? Where do we find information about INVNT? And where do we find the book?
So you can find me at scottcullather.com, SCOTTCULLATHER.com. The company is invent.com, INVNT.com. And the book is published by ForbesBooks. It's called Challenge Everything, the battle cry that blew shit up and invented live brand storytelling. And that can be found on Amazon. It can be found starting in May in all brick and mortar Hudson bookstores in every airport around the country. And then of course on barnesandnoble.com and at Target, etc.
Anybody ever call you a contrarian?
All the time. My wife, who happens to be my business partner, all the time.
But for some reason, I tend to gravitate more toward the contrarians in life, more like seeking like. I really appreciate what you're offering. And there's another point of pain, because hiring is the CEO's responsibility. Whether it gets pushed down to subordinates at any direct level, it is the CEO's primary responsibility to recruit. From the recruitment, there are different hiring practices we put in place, but we can lose a ton of money and time with a bad hire. So how would the challenger approach work in hiring practices?
Yeah, that's a difficult one to master for sure, man. I think in the early days we hired way too fast. We grew, we grew not like Google grew over the years, but we grew exponentially. We had a 50% 70, well, we had a 43% CAGR for the first 10 years of our existence. We grew from one office to 8. And so I think we hired way too fast. So we have this idea that we like to date before we get married. So whenever we can, and sometimes it's not possible, because you might be trying to date somebody that's with a competitor, but oftentimes you can date a potential candidate or employee before you actually get married. And so we now have this notion of, we used to hire fast and fire slow. We now hire slow and fire fast. So we've actually flipped that on its head, basically.
There was a former CEO who went on to become a Vistage, one of the mentors in the Vistage group. He told me he became a really good personal friend. He said, "Bill, you've got to hire slow and fire fast." And I made that mistake a number of times. I made it for a number of reasons. But when you talk about courtship in any measure of life, because business to me, Scott, is a subset of life, you learn about another person's values, about their characteristics, about some of their traits when you're in a courtship process. If you walk up the aisle and the first thing you do is say "I do" when you lift the veil, it's the first time you ever kiss the person, you will have a problem. 99% of the time, you're going to have a problem with that.
True.
What else should an employer, though, look for besides an impressive resume and the ability to interview well, which really gets most CEOs?
Yeah, look, we want to know everything we can about a potential candidate, so we'll scour the internet. You can learn a lot by people's social media posts. You can learn whether they're the right fit or not. You can learn whether they're going to represent your agency or your organization. So there's that. We're interested in what their hobbies are. We're interested in, what they do when they're not working. What are their passions in life? We're interested in how they go about their daily lives. Are they structured, and do they have a sense of flexibility and all of that? And then we characterize it like we have 100 wicked smart teenagers that work at our agency. And when we say that, we don't necessarily, and this is kind of a mindset thing that we're looking for, we don't necessarily mean it's a demographic. So I'm not looking for teenagers, because I'm turning 56 this month, and I still feel like I'm a wicked smart teenager. And that means that, in that teenage mindset, you're willing to take chances, you're willing to take risks, you're willing to fall down, you're willing to fail, and yet you're going to get back up and you're going to go do it again. And so we're looking for people that have that kind of attitude and mentality, and yet that have the right skills for the job that we're looking to fill.
A little bit about Scott. Where did you grow up? And when did you first learn that you were a contrarian and you embraced it? Was it in the drinking water wherever you grew up, or what?
So I grew up in a small town right outside of Washington, D.C. called Rockville, Maryland. It was a basic, lower middle class suburbia type life. And I think I became a contrarian when I moved to New York. And, I got a taste of the Big Apple. I took a bite of the apple, and I left sort of the vanilla life of suburbia Maryland and behind, and became a zesty, feisty New Yorker. And that wasn't until later in my life. I think I was in my late 30s when I moved to New York and became a contrarian.
One of the reasons why you not only the listeners can't see you, but not only do you have a youthful vibrance to you. It emanates from your voice and from your attitude, which is a good form of contagious. It's not a word you want to use today, but it's a good form. You definitely embody a growth mindset. And Carol Dweck, Stanford researcher, talked about the difference between a growth mindset, people that are willing to try and fail and take the challenge on is the most important thing in the process, as opposed to the trophy for participation and trying to get the fixed grades, that fixed mindset. Later in life, she found that the people that do, well and are successful, especially financially, are more of the growth mindset.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with that. And I think that, on a personal level, when I said, scale breeds mediocrity, mediocrity is the best friend of failure. In a personal sense, the same thing happens. The more successful you get, the more you have to lose, the safer you start to play it, right? And so you can take what I said earlier about organizational relationship to that concept and apply it to your personal life too. So my wife, Christine, and I, who's my business partner, I mean, we have a lot more than we did when we started in the business in 2008. And we have a lot more at risk, but we get up every day with the same mindset, charging after it. We call ourselves day slayers. We get up and just slay the day, and we try and do it with as much enthusiasm and energy as we did. I've been in this business 32 years now, as I did 32 years ago, because the thing is, if you get complacent personally, you have the same risk of failure that organizations do when they get complacent.
So I'm going to throw something at you that I'm sure you'll be able to hit out of the park, but I'm going to throw this to you. If you are swimming, generally, and you can swim in a sea of mediocre just by walking out of your door. So you're surrounded by it. You hear it. You turn on the television. You turn whatever you turn to, or get away from it. Whatever you read, whatever sources, people talking. You're surrounded by mediocrity.
Yep.
You are. How do you recharge, man? How do you just bust out and go, okay, now I'm not going to be, the masses are, eventually, no matter how strong your mind, no matter how strong your enthusiasm level, eventually there is some erosion and attrition. How do you recharge, refuel?
Yeah, I agree with that. And so for me, like I have this concept that I started about 2 years ago. It's called 2 for You. And so I get up every morning and give myself 2 hours just for me before I let anything else get in the way of that. And so for me, it's a combination of meditation, or awareness. It's I read, I exercise, combination of things. I love to cycle. I'm a big cyclist, and then I play the piano. And so I'll spend the first 2 hours every morning before I get to my iPhone or get to my computer, and basically just give those 2 hours to me, 2 for you. Before I charge into the rest of it. And that for me actually recharges my batteries every day and gives me that boost of energy to just go out and kick ass, man.
That's something I'm going to attempt to apply. Probably go 1 for me.
You got to start getting getting up really early.
What time do you get up?
I get up around 4:30 or 5 every morning.
Yeah, that's usually a bathroom call for me.
Yeah, but then I'm up.
Then I'm up. The 2 for You concept is you're making it a reality, not just a concept. But that compounding effect over time, over the course of just a month, a year, that compounding effect, how much time, free time, real time do you have then to think, to become of more value to yourself by the things that you can then just by being, a state of meditation.
That's exactly right. And then the other thing that Christine and I do, when I travel like you, Bill, 500,000 miles a year all over the world. But when we're home, and so does my wife, Christina, when we're home, we sit down with our family every single night and have dinner together, awesome. And it's awesome. Really important for us. And it's amazing what comes out at dinner conversations with a teenager at the table.
I can imagine. I think you need to stay entrenched in the family values. You need to have a home, a sanctuary, a place of respite away from the wars, the battles that we fight, the struggles, the challenges every day. And I think that's an anchor on terra firma you're a great embodiment of someone who's anchored in that and has that value system. It's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, my father taught me growing up, he used to use the phrase, make sure you have time to smell the roses. So whatever it is to you as an individual, where you get a chance to smell the roses, man, take advantage of it and try and do it consistently.
You said something that is salient for everyone who has achieved or is achieving a level of success. And I have found this to be the most painful experience for me, and I probably as guilty of it as anyone I've ever experienced or seen. But it's when you start out in the world of business, you're in survival mode. You're like the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy. You have basic needs, job, got to eat, got to pay this, got to do that. And then you start building things if you're building things. And then you get to a state where you had mentioned this, and boy, is it true. You don't want to lose You had nothing to lose before. Now you got stuff to lose. Ego is the biggest part of it, because now you think you've gotten there, you've arrived, you're successful. So you try to maintain. Maintenance is like mediocrity. It's the death knell for the achiever, correct?
Yep, that's correct. That is 100% correct. And you know, so for us, it's all about making sure you keep that mindset that you had when you started the business. And yet, to your point, check the ego at the door. Look, I'm not smart enough to do half the things I used to be able to do 30 years ago. And now I have all these younger people around us that know how to do things faster and smarter and quicker and better. And you got to let them have a sense of autonomy and kind of let go of the things that you used to have to do when you had to do everything. When we started the agency, you know, we were the creative directors, the designers, the CFOs, the salespeople, you know, and now we have a team of people around us supporting us. But you've got to be able to make sure you let go and yet provide the right level of guidance and structure for them, but then give them a level of autonomy.
You know, for selfish reasons, if I want more of my time and I want more of the two for me, I need to be able to permit, to encourage actually other people to make decisions, choices. Because if I don't, if I'm always that head buffalo making all the moves and decisions, not only will I wear myself out, the company will shrink to the size of my ideas, which is going to be very small. And you're going to lose your people. You're going to lose their hearts and minds, and all you have left is the body, which is just overhead. You will lose your best people if you don't do that.
I mean, look, I totally agree with that. I mean, the former agency that I was at before we started INVNT in 2008, you know, they didn't really have what I would call a scalable, sustainable model. And they had a kind of a model that you just described. It was all about them. And they didn't really open up and let other people excel. And you know, I know a lot of very successful people, but they're basically a two-person shop or whatever, and they're living a very nice life. But we set out in 2008 to build a global agency that was scalable and sustainable, and actually leave a legacy, so that when I'm gone, you know, there's 150, 200, maybe there's 500 people one day in this business, because we built it to be scalable and sustainable.
We're going to get to legacy in a second. First, I'm going to ask you this. What is your definition of success?
So I think my definition of success is first and foremost to create happiness for both myself and my family. You know, and if that's all it is, then I'm successful. You know, and to me, that is 100% a constant lifetime pursuit to create happiness for me and my family. And then you know, the second bit of happiness for me is I want to leave a legacy behind. I want to, in my own small way, when I'm long gone, have a group of people that are around and have the ability to live the kind of life that I've lived. I've traveled all over the world. I've seen everything anyone could ever want to see in one lifetime. I've worked with the most incredible people I've worked with just about every global leader or entertainer or business person you can imagine. How great would it be to, you know, defining success, to have an organization that's left behind where individuals in that organization get to do the kinds of things that I have done in my life. Those two things to me would define complete success.
The Greeks would tell us that our obligation in life is to be happy, just to find happiness. And I think that, you know, we create those conditions where happiness can ensue, those conditions. And I think that's what I work for. And your definition does not surprise me. It's very closely aligned with mine. And the other thing that we have to be able to face and overcome and work through is failure. So for you, what was your biggest failure and how did you deal with it?
Well, I've been fired twice. So if I were a cat, I'm probably on my fifth life as in my career, two of which I was fired. So I think that, you know, in hindsight, the first agency, Williams Gerard, where I started, I spent 18 years on my career, and I probably pushed too hard, too soon, and I was too vocal about it. And so I rubbed people the wrong way, but I felt very passionate about, you know, the decisions we were making and my team was making at the time versus where the organization was going. And so that's one failure. And in 2015, our agency was bought by Time Inc., the media giant. And at the time, they had a leader in place, Joe Rip, who was an amazing guy. He wanted to bring live events into his media empire. And as big companies go, he was out, and new leadership came in, and that leader and I didn't see eye to eye in the same things, and so we were effectively disposed of, if you will. And so that to me, I saw was a failure. You know, I thought the Time Inc. deal, when we sold the business to Time Inc., I thought it was the golden ring that we were going to swing out into the future on. And actually, all it really was, Bill, was a brass knob to a door that opened up another opportunity for us. You know, and sometimes you've got to look at those failures and actually learn and grow from them. You know, you're going to get your knees skinned, you're going to get bruised up a little bit, but get your ass back up and get back out there.
That's called resilience. I've learned more from my failures than I ever did from the successes, and I've had a number of failures. That's just part of the price of success.
I actually like to see our employees fail, you know, because I think, number one, it does provide that sense of resilience if they can get back up, but you learn so much out of it. You know, what I don't care for is when you fail on the same thing 3 times or 4 times in a row.
Those are thinking errors, and at a certain point, you got to question the ability to think. But my thing as CEO is that I want to be able to create a fertile environment for people to fail, to grow, to learn, you know, moving 100%. Forward. Not repetitive mistakes of thinking, but learning mistakes, and that's just part of the obligation of leadership, is to train. Yeah.
One of our dear friends raised a family, 6 kids. And she told us one day she was most concerned about the youngest daughter, because the youngest daughter had never experienced failure in her life. Every single thing she did, she achieved fully successfully, you know? And so she was most concerned of all the kids of that daughter because of that reason.
I have so many questions for you from this talk, and so much that I've learned, and I don't say that about every guest, believe me. But there's a number of things that I'm taking from this, and I'd like to have you back on part 2. But as we wrap up part 1, you mentioned legacy. So you're at that stage, you're 150 years old, you lived a great life, you're still vibrant, but you know, at the end of days, you know, you're going to write a paragraph for people to learn from, to grow from, to shorten the distance of where they are and where they intend to go. What would that paragraph look like that you would write and leave as your legacy?
Right. He was a great father and friend. He was an inspirational leader. He was true to his word, and he always showed up.
Oh, a walk-off home run, bases loaded, it's in the river. Show up prepared as a bonus, but show up. And if you always show up, you know what? It's a virtual high five. I guess we can't do that anymore, but it would be a virtual hug. It's about all we're stuck with. Mediocrity is the friend of failure. You are exceptional, my friend, exceptional.
Thank you.
I want you back, and I want to give you the last word on this one more time. Scott, where can we find you?
Thank you, Bill. It was a pleasure being with you, and I'd be excited to come back. You can find me at scottcullather.com, SCOTTCULLATHER.com. The company is INVNT.com, INVNT.com. And the book that my wife, Christina McCubry, and I have written is called Challenge Everything, the battle cry that blew shit up and invented live brand storytelling, and can be found on ForbesBooks.com or Amazon.com or any of the other major booksellers.
Beautiful. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Bill. It was a pleasure.